Confetti, thank you for coming to be on my podcast.
Girl, I am so humbled and honored that you would ask me to be here. Unbelievable.
Here's the thing is that you have such an incredibly kind, wise, caring, resourceful, beautiful soul. And I also, in addition to all of that being quite awesome, I've become obsessed with everything to do with
Hmm.
unschooling our children so that they really get what they need. And
Hmm.
because of that, a conversation with a mutual connection of ours led me
Yeah.
to you. And you were like, Kath, I'm already in your world. And I was at your event. And I'm like, oh, yeah. I'm like, but I didn't know you do all of this. And so I can't wait to break down and have a breakthrough around this conversation. Let's talk about how you became an advocate for real education for
Okay.
children, for your own children, and why it became sort of your like North Star to create a world around homeschooling that other people could be inspired to hopefully also get benefit from.
Oh, well, thank you. That is tremendously kind. Yeah, it's like, okay, how far should we go back? Should we talk about me teaching Cabbage Patch dolls? I'm just kidding.
Oh my God, that is the cutest visual. And now I'm even more obsessed. I'm like, that is so cute. I had Cabbage Patch Kids.
Far back. No, but I literally have always wanted to be a teacher my whole entire life. And I think it came from reading Matilda when I was in second grade. I wanted to be Miss Honey. And I'm like, I can change the world for all these kids. But I started out as a public school teacher, and I quickly learned that the vision I had to make a difference in children's lives, I was not going to be able to do in the kind of situation that I was in with the testing and the requirements. And so then I started a private school and helped get that going. And then I was still like, this isn't it. Like, there's something more. And then I started having lots of babies. So I have 5 children. And I was like, I want to look into this homeschooling thing. So back then, there was not a ton of information. Most of the curriculum that was available was private school curriculum that they marketed to homeschoolers. Like homeschooling didn't even become legal in all 50 states till 1993. So this was in, the early 2000s here, 2001. And so it's still very, very new. Um, and I happened upon a book, the one I sent you, For the Children's Sake by Susan Schaefer Macaulay. And I literally stayed up till 3 a.m. crying, going, and this was back when I was teaching public school. When I first read this book, it was like, this is what education should look like. This is what I want to give these kids, and I can't give this to them, but I could maybe give it to my own kids someday. And then when the time came for me to start homeschool, I got that book back out and I was like, this is the picture of what I want. And so very much focused on real books, real life, real connections, real discussions. And as I started doing things with my own children, people were like, well, you should sell this. You should tell other people about this. You should help other families. I'm like, everybody knows how to do this. And they're like, no, no, they don't. And so it just kind of very organically grew out of what I was doing at home with my own children and then wanting to share it. And then people would buy my curriculum, start using it, and then they'd share it with other people. And it just kind
Yeah.
of grew from there.
There's so many places I want to go with this conversation. First of all, I just want to say that I think it really is worth a conversation when we stop and ask ourselves, why are we doing what we're doing in any regard? For
Yep.
instance, if everyone's eating chips and going to fast food, is that because it's the best thing to do? Or is it because everyone's just decided to do that? Like, so often, the thing that everyone's just doing, when
Mhm.
you bring a little inquiry to it, you realize, oh, actually, I wouldn't choose that for myself. But
Right.
everyone's swimming along with the fish and doing all the things that the fish do. And so, school is one of the most
Get it?
insidious.
As a fun, the school fish.
Right. School and the fish. Yeah, exactly. It's the most really like insidious thing because it sets up the whole trajectory of your life, right? And
Absolutely. Hmm.
you and I both now know that we come across, and this is like really at the center of my work, I come across adults every day who are such beautiful human beings
Hmm.
who are trapped by this condition of needing to be inside of a box
Yep.
and being afraid to scribble outside the lines
Mhm.
and not having access to their creativity, to their soul,
Mhm.
to all of the different ways that they were meant to color the world in their unique way.
Yes.
Because from kindergarten through 12th grade, they were told to sit still.
Mhm.
And it's just, I want you to go deep with this. I want you to start to like
There's so much
literally
here.
take all the things out of the box and start show. I want you to help unravel and bring as much insight, as much data, as much storytelling as you want to like why the system as it is, the same way that right now people are like, maybe no seed oils, maybe no corn syrup, maybe this is horrible for us, right? It's like, help us understand why this, the way that it is, so to speak,
Okay.
has got to be changed because there's all the things that you now know that are true. They are literally tested and true, and they don't make it make sense. It no longer makes it make sense that we've just continued to do what we've been doing. So help us understand what you, because I'm only beginning to start. I knew it intuitively my whole life,
Right. Yep. Me too.
but
Yep.
I've only now like really said to myself, I have three daughters. My oldest is 13, my youngest is 8. And I'm like, I'm Kathy Heller with the beliefs I have. Why are my children in school? I don't subscribe to any of this. I've just been like doing my best, and we've moved schools, we've switched schools, trying to find a school that could do the things that I wanted to do on behalf of giving my kids what I think really schools can do. And finally I turned to you and I'm like, Julie, heaven help me. You are my angel sent on the path because I need an exit and I need to
Yeah.
know where I'm headed when I get off this highway. So tell us
Mhm.
what you found about school, about what it does to kids, about what it doesn't do for kids. Help us understand the level of actually how not healthy it maybe is
Mhm.
and what we really need to kind of start thinking about instead.
Awesome. I love that. This is great. So, yeah, so I've been in education for 30 years. So like I said, it's public school, private school, homeschool. So I'm not anti any of those. And I want to be really clear about that because I think there can be really great ones of all of them, and there could be really bad ones of all of those. So it's more, I'm against this standardized, streamlined, industrialized system of education that we have, which is very young in the history of humankind. Okay. So since compulsory education laws in like the 1850s, so not even 200 years here we're talking about, okay, has been this like experiment of let's have the state run the school. Before then, that never existed. So it was, you had tutors, you had parents, you had, um, certain people who could afford those kinds of things, obviously, but a lot of people were taught at home and their families and those kind of things. Um, and then, or church schools, were really popular as well. And so in the late 1700s in Prussia, King Frederick II started compulsory schooling. And it was really to get the citizenship at a level where everyone was kind of all on the same page. Like, we're creating the society of these citizens, and they all have a certain body of knowledge, and they all believe these things. So if we can indoctrinate them when they're small children, then we'll have a certain, a level of adults who are loyal to me as the king, basic theory, right? So then in the 1850s, Horace Mann went to Prussia, looked at the system of education that was happening there, came back to Massachusetts, was like, we need compulsory schooling here in the United States. And he has some really good things. Like, a lot of these people had really good hearts of let's get these kids out of factories. 100% agree with that. But like, so if we have compulsory schooling, this will keep child labor from happening. There's some really great people. I don't want to like diminish their work and
Sure.
their
No,
effort.
this is good. This is really good. Yeah, keep going.
Like Horace Mann, one of his quotes, he actually refers to children as hostages. Like, we have to get the parents to release the hostages to us. And he also said parents were ill-equipped to teach their own children because they love them too much. That if you love someone too much, you might be too lenient or let things go or you'll coddle your
Fascinating.
children. But it's like, those are the people that should be with you, right? The people that love you, that care about you, want you to be successful in life, you know? And so it's really interesting. But even then, when it actually got passed, it was for 12 weeks. So it wasn't what we have now, and it wasn't 8 hours a day, and it wasn't 2 hours of homework. And, it just has grown and grown and grown since then. And so it really was viewed in our country as this is how we can make good employees. So if you look at Rockefeller, he donated a ton of money to starting like the first kind of, if you will, like national education society. And it was really like, we need a certain class of people who can be obedient, who can sit still and do monotonous tasks for 8 hours a day, who can move to different things when a bell rings, who can be compliant and do what they're told. And when you realize like the history of it, like you're saying, like it's kind of like the Matrix, like you take the pill and you're like, what? Like, I don't want that for my kids, and it's not like that's what it all is everywhere, right? But you kind of have to look at the history of it and see kind of, oh, whoa, that's not what I want for my family. Even Woodrow Wilson said, this was a speech he gave to, I think it was, yeah, right after World War I, and he gave it to the National New York Teachers Association, but he was saying, we need to have two classes of people. We need to have people who have this kind of humanities liberal education, and then we need to have a class of people who are trained to be employees. And he said it's up to the teachers to decide which class a student is. Yeah, I know, right? It's like, so it's, and we're like what you're saying. Okay, so that's some of the history, right? And
Oh my God, I just want to say, I mean, first of all, it makes me think of Dr. Gladys. She died when she was like 103. She died like, I think 2 years ago. I had her on my
yes, that
podcast.
book, yes, uh-huh.
Yeah. And she was an OBGYN. And she said that when she got into residency, she saw all these women giving birth on their back, like laying in a bed,
Mm-hmm.
and they're trying to have a baby. And she's like, no, because gravity would make more sense that you would squat, right? And so that is another example, right? And so when I went to have my first daughter, someone told me, oh, you can use these like squat bars. The bed will kind of like move a different way and you have to ask for it. They won't offer it to you. And then it'll be a different experience.
Right.
And so it was so unbelievably powerful to do it that way. And then years later, when I spoke to her, she sort of corroborated this information. And she's like, women go into that scenario and all of a sudden they actually feel disempowered, right? Because of even the way that they're physically, you know, in this is the way this is being facilitated. It's taking them out of a sense of power and agency, right? And then of course a lot of things can go wrong because there's a delay, and then they need the to speed it up and give you all of these different pitocin and whatever. And it was just like, you don't ask the questions because you're just following along. But when you hear that, it makes so much sense. And when you just said all of that, it makes so much sense. You're sitting still, you're being told to do the things you need to do. When the bell rings, you move, whatever. And then you just said this thing about the teachers, like decide who should be an employee and who should be, doing more of this creative work. And I think about being in second grade and watching certain kids go into gifted, right? In public school, there was like the
Yep.
gifted kids.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember my dad's a psychologist, so he tested some of the kids for gifted.
Oh,
And I
wow.
asked him, what do they do in gifted? And he goes, well, don't worry about it because you don't have the
Oh,
grades to be in gifted. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, fine. I go, but what do they do in there? And he's like, oh, they play games. And I'm thinking, wait, you have to
that's
have
not
the best,
fair.
you get the best grades, but then you just get to go play games and I have to study for this test that I don't want to do. And it's wild, right? It's wild because every child is gifted and
Mhm.
every child was put in the world to think outside of a box and be creative. So how sick almost, really, that
Mhm.
we've now gotten so used to a system that tells a child to sit down and study for a test. But tell us more. Like, is is there any benefit to doing all the homework, and what actually happens with all the information? Do we store it? Do we actually get to become entrepreneurs or go up the ladder because we went to good schools and we got good grades? Like, what, tell us more about what we're all up to, because everyone's up to, and it's only gotten harder for your kids to get through school to then get into college. It's like gotten harder and harder and harder. So it's gotten even more demanding for kids to be in school.
Right. And it's, so going back to like what I was saying, like the kind of history there, like children are born, we're naturally curious. We are naturally playful people. And so to have to sit there, right, and just memorize things. So if you look at like early schools, right, they were very punishment driven, like with the rulers, you can
Oh
picture
my
like
God.
Charles Dickens, it was horrible what they did to children in these things. And I actually went to school. We still had paddling when I was in school. So now I feel really old, but it was still happened. Thank God, never to me. But so it's like we have to punish in order to get compliance. Well, we can't do that anymore, praise the Lord. But it became, well, what else can we do to get compliance? What else can we do to get the kids to like do this, right? And so it became very reward driven, very grades, marks, compete with each other. Um, you can earn stickers, you can earn prizes for reading so much. It became very reward centered. And now we have where education's being gamified, right? And so you can play these games and earn these prizes, and you're getting all this dopamine hits all day long watching these videos. And then, like, we're asking you to think critically, but they can't because anyway. So then we're wondering why people aren't motivated as adults. Well, they were never internally motivated. It was all external motivation to get them kind of through the system. And then kind of what you're talking about with some of the people that you work with, and I definitely see that as well with some of the women I coach. Like, I kind of see like three different paths. So you have the people who become like overachievers, perfectionists. Like, I can succeed in this system if I put unbelievable pressure on myself and I work really, really hard, and if I get the teacher to like me. So oftentimes it becomes like the people pleasers are, oh, I just give the teacher exactly what they want, and then I can get this grade, I can get this mark, I can be successful. And so people go into that group. And then there's the group that's like, I don't really think I'm going to be successful. I don't really want to please people. So I'm just going to either like cheat the system, work the system, try to like get by and get through here. And then you have the group, which is the part that broke my heart the most as a teacher, was that I'm never going to succeed in this system. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. I don't know what's going on. I'm never going to get these good grades. And so they just develop like this learned helplessness, and they don't realize all the potential that they have inside of them, which is really just horrific in my opinion. And so basically, this kind of reward punishment system, get the grades, get the marks, and kind of what you're talking about, it's gotten harder and harder because like when this first started, you have like 1% of the population going to university, and now it's, if you don't go to the university, like, what is your kid going to do with their life? They're never going to be successful, and it becomes this,
Oh dear God.
let me breathe. I'm talking so, where your child will never succeed. And childhood becomes a period of resume building in order to get them to something later on, rather than childhood is a beautiful thing in and of itself. And let them play, let them be curious, and let them grow at their own pace and in their own way. But in a system, you can't do that. I often say, like, do all 6-year-olds wear the same size shoe? No, but why are we expecting all 6-year-olds to read and write sentences and do these things that aren't even developmentally appropriate? And when you look at like other countries, so the World Happiness Project just released their report like a couple weeks ago, like the world's happiest countries, right? And Finland won again. And it boggles my mind. I mean, I've been there, it's beautiful, but it's so cold. I'm like, how can
How
happy
can you be
people be in
happy
the
when you're
cold?
this cold?
I
That's so
don't
funny.
understand. But they win like all the time. But Finland's also ranked in the top 5 all the time in global education. And so it made me think, like, is there a relationship between how we're educated and then our future happiness? And if we're currently educating people in this system of rewards and achievements and striving all the time, does that lead to happiness later on?
It's so fascinating. Oh my God. I was thinking about that song, so it brought tears to my eyes. The country song, Let Them Be Little, because they're only that way
Yes.
for a while. give them strength, give them joy, give them love every day, let them sleep in the middle, just let them be little. Oh my gosh, makes me cry. But it's really something that deserves our attention at this point. And I just heard a statistic about how it used to be that people wanted college to be necessary in order for employers to, know who to choose. But now college has become something that so many people do that actually now they don't care about college. You have to go to grad school. So they just keep moving the goalpost, right? And it's just so fascinating to me that we are robbed of the most crucial time for us to explore. And I think about Wayne Gretzky, and I heard him actually speak the night I met Wayne Gretzky, who's, for people who are listening, are like, who is that? The best
I know
hockey,
who he is.
yeah,
I'm from
best hockey
Pittsburgh.
player of all time. The night I heard him speak with the late Sir Ken Robinson, who had so much to say about education and
Yeah, his TED
creativity.
Talk is fantastic.
His TED Talk, if you guys are listening and you want to watch an amazing TED Talk that backs up everything Julie just said, go search Sir Ken Robinson TED Talk and you'll love it. But the reason the two of them spoke together the night that I heard them speak is
It's amazing.
because they had studied high performance individuals and come to find out that what created their high performing life was an ingredient in childhood where they were encouraged to scribble outside the lines. And Wayne
Mhm.
Gretzky talked about how his mom was like, do you see those street lights? Do not come home until those lights go on. I want you
My parents
outside.
did.
I want you exploring and all of this stuff. And he played hockey in a way that nobody else played hockey because his father used to say on the way home from practice, plug your ears and don't listen to your coach, just do you, right? And because he had this permission slip to be always seeing a greater possibility, the coach would call the play and he would be seeing all these other ways to sort of like be on the ice. And
Mhm.
Sir Ken Robinson was saying like he was encouraged to not listen to the rules. And I was encouraged because my mom plays piano, my mom is a musician. She used to say to me, forget the grades. I would, if I got a D in science, she'd go, did you kill anybody? Did you murder somebody? And I'd be like, that's the funniest response. And she used to say, I don't care about this stuff. And so after school is when I would actually come alive because I would do theater, art, dance, and I was living a creative life outside of school. And school was just like a total chore. It was just like go through the motions and then get home so you can do all the actual stuff that makes you come alive and makes you
Yes.
show up
Right.
in the world. And so I feel teary when you go through the different distinctions of children because my oldest one is the one who falls in the category of
It's
learned
often the oldest.
helplessness. Yeah, she's like, I don't know how to play the game. And I guess I'm just not smart enough to do it. And I'm like, no, you're actually really creative. And of course you're bored when they teach you this way and they're overwhelming you with fire hose of information to memorize. And it got to the point of like, I have her in a competitive school in Los Angeles, a private school, which is just like, it's so rigorous that I don't know. I think they've lost the forest for the trees, even though there's also a lot of good families there and stuff. It's just the mandate that all the
Yeah.
teachers have to follow is a
Mhm.
really interesting track. And I wish she was not on that train on that track. What's even more worrisome actually is that my middle daughter is getting the grades and she's a little introverted and very creative and a really good artist. And realizing that if she just keeps her mouth shut, she can get the approval by doing this stuff. And actually, I think it's pulling her out of her creativity. And my younger one is like, she loves to dance, she loves to paint, she's got a lot of energy. She's like, Mom, I'm ready to leave school. I'm not going to college. I'm like, you're 8. She's like, but I know. I'm like, what are you gonna do when you grow up? She's like, podcast, sing, dance. I'm not going to college, so I don't want to go to school anymore. And I'm like, oh my God, so you show up in the world to help other moms now and other dads to homeschool their kids. What are the things that you have provided that you think are the essential roadmap? Because I looked at your curriculum and it brought tears to my eyes. What have you learned that actually helps parents to do this? Because it really, once we do get that this is a critical issue to look at, the next
Mhm.
problem is we don't know what to do. and it feels
Mhm.
completely overwhelming. And so then you just go back to what you know because you don't know how to chart the course. So teach us where we go from here.
Yeah, and that's actually something I talk a lot to parents about, and I see this a lot in the homeschool community. And I'm looking, at a homeschool convention, there'll be thousands of people selling their, you know, curriculum and whatnot, but it looks just like what I taught in public school. And I'm like, why are we
Right.
perpetuating? I don't understand
So
here.
interesting. You're just now doing it at home in the kitchen
Yeah,
versus at school.
yeah, yeah. I'm like, okay. And so oftentimes, though, and I was like that when I first started homeschooling. Like we had circle time and we said the pledge and we had recess time because like that's what I knew. And we had our textbooks with our workbooks, and I could check that my kid got 9 out of 10 right today. And I'm like, okay, they're learning something. We're all going to be okay. And it took a couple years for me to kind of let that go. And so I just want to say to parents that might be listening, that's okay. Like if you feel like, okay, I need to know that like this is the things they're supposed to learn and we're doing the thing. But part of it is unschooling ourselves, or what they call deschooling, because it's so ingrained in us that this is the only way you can learn is if you're sitting down and someone is teaching you, which is you know, not how humans learn for thousands of years, but it is so ingrained and we don't realize how ingrained it is. And we also don't realize how ingrained it is in us that we have to achieve certain things in order to be successful. And then we put that into our children that they have to be achieving these things in order for us to feel successful, that we're homeschooling correctly. And so it takes a lot of work to let that go for ourselves. And once we can have that faith and confidence in ourselves, then we can allow our children to kind of be themselves and grow at their own pace and do their thing. Um, so for me, what is super important is that we feed our children ideas. So in school, it's very focused on information. So like you were saying about your daughter, like rote memorization, learn the things for the test, and then you can forget them, right? It's all like in your short-term memory, you
So
cram, cram,
weird.
cram, and then you forget. Actually, Einstein even talked about that, how he would like cram, cram, cram for a test, and then he would forget it, so that by the time he was done with school, he wouldn't even touch science for over a year because he was so sick of it. And so it makes you like when you cram yourself with food, you get sick, right? And so you cram yourself with a bunch of information for a test. And I think I might have told you this, but my reoccurring nightmare for 20 years of my adult life was that I was going back to college and I had to take a test. It was the final exam, but I had never been to class or I didn't know what was on the test and I was going to fail. Like as a grown woman, I still had so much anxiety that I would fail. So I couldn't take risks. And you're talking about like, how does that affect your ability as an adult? Like you were conditioned not to take risks because if you risk, you fail. And I don't want to fail because my whole future success depends on whether or not I pass this class and then I get into this college. And so it's like, I can't take a risk. I have to do exactly what they say and, show that the teacher that I know what they were talking about and that their whatever they told me was the right answer. That's what I'm going to give them back. I'm not going to like think critically or ask questions or come up with my own opinion. Right. And so we kind of build that. And then as parents, we can put that into our own kids if we're not careful to work through that ourselves, if that makes sense. And so,
Makes so much sense. Oh my gosh. I'm just sitting here thinking about how there's so much human capital that's lost
mm,
because we have turned off the permission to think and create.
mhm,
We've moved into another part of our brain, which is giving us a requirement to get something right and to ask someone else what we need to do, and then hit the bell, ring the bell when we're done. Versus where did Walt Disney get his idea? Where did Monet come up with his idea? You
mm,
know, all of the things that have moved humanity forward didn't come from being inside of this box. And with what's happened in the world, it's just so interesting that we're not even preparing our kids for the world has changed so much. And
right.
this is
We're
not a
not a
world that's going to,
society of workers anymore, and
it's
employers are
ideas,
finding that out, right?
it's
Yeah.
content creation, it's ideas, it's design, it's disruption and new ways to solve problems and innovation. Yeah.
Yeah. And so employers are finding like we need people who can think outside the box, but we've spent their whole education training them to stay in the box. And so now it's like, well, what do we do? Where are we going to get these people? And especially with AI, everything is changing so fast. So we created a system that was for the early 1900s worker. That was what we're going for. Okay, well, now it's the 2000s. What kind of workers do we need now? And is what we're, the system that we have is not creating the results that we want. And so, like, Google came out with a study of their top employees and what skills they had. And STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, came dead last. Their top employees had soft skills, empathy, compassion, being able to express ideas, being able to work in community and work with other people, right? And one of the things people always ask to say about homeschooling, like, they're not going to be socialized. They're not going to know how to like work with other people. And I'm like, in schools, they don't let you work with other people. Like, sometimes in good schools, right, they have collaborative learning, but most of the time it's sit in your desk and be quiet. And so you don't actually communicate with other people, but that's the world that we live in now. You have to be able to connect with other people to be successful in the business world, but you don't learn that skill when you're sitting at your desk.
Also, you were sharing with me on a conversation we had earlier, but I heard it today on a reel. Once you start looking at certain content, you get that content. So I've been getting a lot of different clips on education, and the guy was saying that something you said, which is it's so like really bizarre that when you go to school, you're only with people your exact same age,
Yeah,
because in the real world, what makes things even more interesting and what helps us, he was saying that when kids are just with other kids, so it's like an 8-year-old with a 14-year-old with a 3-year-old, there's a lot less bullying because they're all learning how to be empathetic and be leading, and all of these things happen naturally. And when everyone's the exact same age, it's almost like bizarro world where
it
they're
is.
they're all
So
only talking to versions of themselves, and so they're not gaining, right? And when you take kids out of that environment, it's like, of course you can be friends with someone who's 2 years older, 8 years older, 3 years younger. Like, that's how real life works. It's all of these things. When you start holding them into the light, you're like, this really does, why are we still perpetuating this? It really doesn't make sense. So what do you tell us? Because you've told me a little bit, and I absolutely love some of the things that you have created inside of your Gentle Feast curriculum. Tell us about how you start a day, and what are the things that you do that are not the version that you started with, where you thought you had to do what they do in school just at home. Like, tell us a little bit about why yours is different.
so we start our day off with morning time, which is where we spend about 30 minutes um, filling our minds with beauty, truth, and goodness. So that actually comes, the Greek word skole, which is where we get scholar or school from, means leisure. So it's the Greek word for leisure. Isn't that mind blowing?
Yeah.
Because when you think of school, you think of work, right? But for them, it was the opposite. So you have work, like you're planning your field, right? Or you're building your house or whatever. And then you have leisure, which is the time where you can paint, where you can write a drama, where you can be creative, where you can philosophize about ideas. Like that is your leisure. So you work so that you have time for this leisure for your school. Whereas now schools work, like do your homework, all this stuff, and we work at school, and then we can go play. But most of the time, our play is, well, I'm just going to like sit on my phone or Netflix and chill or whatever. But it's not actually nourishing our minds and our souls.
Yes.
And
Oh my
so this
God.
concept of scole is this restful learning that's focused on truth, beauty, and goodness. So when you start our day off with listening to Mozart or looking at a beautiful painting or reading poetry. Like you're priming your mind. Part of education too is training our affections, what it is that we love.
Oh
And
my God.
so
Beautiful.
I want my kids to love the things that are true and beautiful and good. And so if they see that and if they hear that, then the rest of the day, their minds are full of that truth, beauty, and goodness. It becomes a restful thing, not a forced thing. And so a lot of the current model is students are empty buckets and we're going to stuff information into them rather than lighting a fire, like that famous quote. Like we're going to
Yeah.
help develop the person that's inside of them. And so we start off our day with that. And then we use real books. So as opposed to like a textbook, which is the bare facts, right? um, a real book, and this can be for history, it could be biographies. There's lots of wonderful books, even for like high school chemistry, for all the subjects except for math. Uh, and what happens when you read a real book? So studies they actually did this study and they did like MRIs on college kids' brains and they had them read like an engineering textbook and certain parts of their brains lit up. And then they had them read an engineering book teaching the same concept, but it was told in a narrative fashion. And all different parts of their brains were lighting up.
Wow.
So you're thinking on such a deeper level when you're reading
Right.
the story, because as humans, we're
Of
created, we're
course.
storytellers, right? We learn by story and we also tell stories. We
Right.
express our thoughts. And so we read real books and we talk about them. So there's not a test afterward to make sure you learn the 5 points in this. It's, well, what did you think about that? What did you find interesting? And what happens is, this is called narrating, but it really is just telling back what you remember about something. But it's a much higher level thinking skill than like a recall question, like
Yeah.
what date did, and so
Oh my
being able to
God.
tell someone something, you have to think about it like what came first, what came second, what's important, what's not important.
Oh my
And
God.
then your kids put it into their own words and
Yeah.
they're able to communicate, which is what we want. We want people that can communicate complex ideas, right? But they
Yeah.
don't get to communicate. And so they're telling it back to you. And Charlotte Mason, that's the woman who was an educational philosopher in England, who my stuff is built upon her ideas. But she said, narrating is like art. It's like poetry making and painting. It's
Hmm.
there inside of every child, just waiting to be drawn forth. So every child has this ability, but we
Yeah.
don't ever let them express it. And one of the things I loved about it is each of my kids, I could read them the same story and they're all going to tell me something different.
Yeah.
So my son would be like, "Oh, well, there's this guy and they cut his head off and this was the
Yeah.
weapon." And then my daughter was like, "Oh, and she felt really da da da," and she's describing the flowers. Like
Yeah.
kid brings their personality to it, which is so beautiful because that's what you want. You want them to be able to express their own voice, their own ideas, not copy this passage and make it sound just like this person. And this is the formula for writing a 5 paragraph essay. It's like, no, what's your voice? Express yourself, express your
No.
thoughts.
It's so beautiful. And I was thinking about how when I was in like third grade, everybody was assigned a different president, and mine was Thomas Jefferson. And I can remember
He was
the,
homeschooled, by the way.
oh, right, of course. I can remember the poster board, and I had to write all the facts, and I don't remember any of the facts, right? But I remember having to do this project because I remember that I was assigned Thomas Jefferson, and I remember nothing about him, except that I think he signed the Declaration of Independence, but I don't remember anything else. Okay. So then I think about how, we're about to enter the month of April. My family's going to celebrate Passover. And if you ask any Jewish child who sat at a Passover Seder, what is the story of the Exodus from Egypt, they can tell you every single detail about that, right? There was a Pharaoh, there was a this, because it was a story. And we tell that story every single year. And for 3,000 years, we've told that story. And we know the story and we know every detail of that story. And so it's like, why? Well, because at the Seder, the Passover Seder, everything's supposed to be interactive. In fact, the kids are supposed to lead it. The kids are supposed to narrate it and ask the questions and you're supposed to come up with a new question that no one's ever asked. So it's all interactive.
Love that.
And the whole idea of eating the matzah is to remember the taste of the sand in the desert. So you're supposed to experience again what it's like to be set free from your own personal Egypt and reconnect to God and find God in your life at any moment, at any time. And it's not linear, it's now. And so therefore it's like, what's your own? Anyway, the point is, it's like, that is the most celebrated holiday. And now so many other people, no matter what their narrative is, they have like their own version of that, where they like try to have that come to life, where they tell a narrative like that for themselves as a family. But I just think about how we miss out on so much, and children are so curious. They have so many questions. And they also have so many cool ideas and so many things that they naturally want to add, but we're telling them to be quiet most of the day. And we're not trusting that just talking through things and letting them say back what they heard will actually keep them integrating it, rather than telling them to just spit out facts, memorize the facts, and then regurgitate them. So it's like, we now have the data, what do they say? Like, to know but not to do is actually like ignorance. It's like, we now know it doesn't work, but we keep doing it. So why? It's like, so I think the biggest question that comes up when I talk to people about this, I'm like, oh my God, I met Julie Ross and I'm going to come up with this curriculum now because she has this guidance. And people are like, yeah, but how are your kids going to have friends? So when kids are homeschooled, number one, how doable really is that for a parent? Do you have to quit your job in order to do it?
Okay.
For me, my life is easy because I make my own schedule. I have my own business. But for other people, can they really pull it off? And B, where do their kids get to leave the house and actually interact with lots of other kids if they're not in school?
Yeah, those are great questions. Studies have actually shown that homeschool kids have greater social and emotional skills than their public school peers.
Wow.
And I think that's a misnomer of we don't sit at home all day long. So 98% of homeschool families, their children are involved in at least 5 activities outside the house. And there's so much available now, so many co-ops, activities. And I love it, girl. I'm just going to tell you a little secret here because you go to these places during the week and nobody else is there. And it's awesome. Like go to the museum and go to the zoo and like there's no crowds. Fantastic. Um, but they provide a lot of homeschool free things at all these places, museums and art classes.
Wow.
Incredible. And but there's so many now because it's grown so much. There's other families that you can do things with. And like you were saying too, I love that when we get together and like we go on a nature walk with other homeschool families, right? The older kids are being really gentle with like the little kid and they're helping them across. And then the older kid is like, I mean, the younger kid is like watching the older kid to like see how they do that. I want to follow them and do this, task. And so it builds this amazing community. And like you're saying, it's the ability to interact with people that are older than you and people that are younger than you. But you do have to be intentional about it as a homeschool parent. Like it's not like it kind of just happens because you're sitting next to somebody, right, at lunch and
Yeah.
oh, now they're my friend, right? Like, so you do have to be very intentional about finding those pockets of times. In terms of like doability, I now it's easier than it ever has been. Just the amount of resources, technology, again, having other homeschool families and having it grow so you're not kind of like isolated has made it so much easier. But in terms of working, again, that I feel like is the growing demographic of homeschool parents because it is a big sacrifice to go to one income. And so a lot of parents, they're tag teaming, like mom and dad are both doing it. I have several grandparents who are using my curriculum who are homeschooling their grandchildren. Um, and then a lot of parents are creative, and like you're saying, if you have a job where you can be flexible with your hours, that really helps. Um, but I know people who they work full time and they're bringing their kid with them in their office and their kid's doing this thing over here and or they're doing stuff in the car or they're doing stuff when they get home from work and I think you have to have a village at that point to help you to do that, but that's part of it, right? It's part of it is having this community and your kids getting to experience that and see it as well. And I think it's a little bit easier when they're older to kind of have that flexibility because they're more independent in their learning than they might be when they're younger. But again, like homeschooling doesn't take out 8 hours. So in 2 to 4 hours, you can cover a ton because you're not having all these distractions. Your kids are actually
Of
focused
course.
because they're actually interested in the things. And so they can give their focused attention instead of daydreaming and doing whatever. And so you're not having to wait in line, those kind of things. So you
Yeah.
can really get done a lot sooner too. So if you only need 2 to 4 hours, can you find that within the job that you currently have? And I think a lot of families are like, oh, wait, that's actually possible. But I think we get in our minds like, oh, it has to be 8 hours and it has to be my kid sitting here and I have to be the one preparing and teaching. And if you don't use that model and if you really help your students to embrace self-education and learning for themselves, which is research has shown is going to help them a lot when they're older because they, like Marie Forleo says, everything is figure outable. Like
Yeah.
you want that drive as an adult to figure things out. And now it's easier than ever for that to happen. And so our kids can take a lot more responsibility and be more independent learners as they get older. Um, can I read you something? So my daughter, you met her at the podcast summit. So she's 24. So she graduated from college with graphic design and she has a photography business. She's had this since she was 15. So when she was in high school, we got her camera, she started
Love
taking
that.
pictures, and,
Yeah. Yeah.
I got her Lightroom and all this stuff, figured out.
Oh, I got a Lightroom you got her? That's amazing. Of course.
So she was just in a national magazine. The article came out this morning, and they were interviewing entrepreneurs, and she says, without a doubt, I'm gonna cry. Okay. Without a doubt, my parents have been the most influential people in shaping my journey as a photographer and a business owner. Both of them are entrepreneurs, so I grew up watching them build and run their own businesses. Seeing their work ethic, resilience, and commitment firsthand was the best education I could have asked for. When I first picked up a camera as a teenager, it was just a hobby, but my parents saw the potential in me even before found it in myself. Instead of dismissing, they helped me turn it into something real. They taught me not only the importance of mastering my craft, but also how to think like a business owner, how to price my work, manage my finances, and most importantly, believe in my value. Starting a business at 15 wasn't easy, and there was plenty of moments of doubt. But my parents were always there to remind me that every successful entrepreneur starts somewhere. They pushed me to take risks, learn from my mistakes, and keep going even when things felt overwhelming. Their belief in me gave me the confidence to believe in myself. Now, years later, I see so much of what they taught me reflected in my work, whether it's the way I connect with clients, the pride I take in my brand, or my drive to keep growing forward. I'm forever grateful that they gave me the courage to start and the wisdom to keep building something I truly love. So
Well,
precious.
that is the single greatest testimonial that you could ever get. And it's so beautiful. And it's such a vision of what's possible. And I love that it came out today. Of course, the serendipity of you sharing that. We get to be the recipient of that beautiful serendipity and hear it. It's really fascinating in so many ways. And you have a podcast called the Feast Life Podcast. And I think what's interesting about all of this is that when you really zoom out and now you get beyond homeschool conversation about homeschool versus school, you just talk about life.
Mhm.
What are you really intending? What do you really want it to look like? And I think the
Mhm.
fact that everyone is so busy, are you really busy doing the things you want to be doing? Do you really want to be spending all those hours doing that job? Or do you really want to be spending more time with your children while you have that time? And do you really love the life that you're building? Or do you think you might be able to get resourceful and get time back to live
Mhm.
your life on your terms, right? Which is where your work and my work kind of come together, because I feel like when my dad was dying in hospice and he was looking at all of the degrees on his walls from Johns Hopkins and Columbia and whatever, he was like, I wish I had more daylight to go back and spend more time with you guys than I spent at work. As my favorite moments were not the moments at work. And he really actually loved his work, which is he enjoyed it. He felt really passionate. He was a forensic psychologist and he got to do really interesting things and he worked on really cool cases. And still, he felt like, I wish I could go back, not to spend more time at work, but to spend more time doing the little in between things that we used to do. And he kept talking about our trip to the Grand Canyon or collecting seashells on the beach. And it's just like, you know, we have we have the time to be able to stop and say, what do I really want to do with my time? And so on your podcast, you talk about homeschool, but you also talk about exploring life as a feast. Just tell
Mhm.
us about what the mission or intention is for your podcast and how it helps people to really right size their life so that their life feels like a feast rather than just a roller coaster.
Oh, I love the way that you describe that. Thank you. And the metaphor of a feast, I feel like that's what my curriculum is called
I
because it
love
has
it
to do
too.
with what we're doing with our children, but it's also for us as the parent. So oftentimes we put ourselves last and we're not nourishing our own minds and hearts and souls. And so we need to go first and we need to be modeling that for our children that we are growing and we're expanding. And I have to say that homeschooling, I will never regret the time that I spent with my kids homeschooling ever. I'm so, so incredibly grateful that I had these years with them, but it has, and I'm so grateful for that. But one of the other things I'm extremely grateful for is how it changed me as a person. It gave me back my, like I was the overachiever, have to have the 4.0 kid, right? Let me just go through the system and do what everybody tells me to do so I can be successful in life kind of person. And it allowed me to love learning again for the sake of learning. It changed me as a person. So I'm the person who's driving down the road and I'm pulling over because I see some bird and I'm like, oh my gosh, we got to check this out. Like, I've never happened before. It changed my affections, and the truth, goodness, and beauty that I was pouring into them also shaped my heart. So that when our family went through a really trying time, like the education that I was giving to my children healed me at the same time. So like our Bible verse for the morning was like the armor of God. And I'm like, okay, I got this. I can do this. And I'm reading Heidi about this little orphan girl who's like so strong and she's like has faith even in the midst of like, I'm like, okay, we can do this. And then we're out in nature and I'm just seeing like, oh, God has got us. This is so beautiful. We're taken care of. And like that's what I mean by a feast. So Charlotte Mason has this quote. She says, the question is not how much does the youth know when he has finished his education, but how much does he care? And about how much order of things does he care? In fact, how large is the room upon which his feet are set? And therefore, how full is the life he has before him? Our education, our aim in education is to give a full life. Life should be all living, not a mere tedious passing of time. So that's like the tagline of my podcast. Life should be all living, not a mere tedious passing of time. And I feel like homeschooling, depending on how you do it, can be a gift to you as a parent as well and give you a full life in addition to your children.
It's so beautiful. I think you maybe were in on this last week, but I was teaching a workshop and telling the people who were there, I was telling everybody that life should be like jazz, and I played
I
jazz,
love that. I loved it so much. That was
and
so
I it was so good, and
good.
like I had people like scribbling outside the lines, and it's just it's really uncanny when you zoom out, and I've talked to thousands of people, and to come to find out that the biggest pain point in their life, which they didn't know how to articulate, was that they don't feel like they're enough until they achieve something, and they don't know what the next thing is to achieve, and they don't know how to achieve it. And yet all they're really looking for is a feast, and
Mm-hmm.
it's right outside, and it's actually right inside, and it's
Mm-hmm.
all around. And they've been only trained to, like you said, be motivated and rewarded for the next achievement. And after a while, they have like adrenal fatigue to like keep achieving. And then everything just feels so depleting rather than abundant, because all the abundance was never what they were feasting upon. It was just like this tediousness, this hamster wheel. And so to get people off that wheel is such a blessing. And you're doing such incredible, beautiful work in the world. And I'm so happy that we met, and I'm so inspired. And I hope that I can continue to share the journey as I stumble through. But I'll say this one last thing, which is that my daughter has been picking up on me manifesting this. So she said to me 2 days ago, I want to go to an art class. I said, okay, I'll find you one. She goes, no, right now, today. So I call a few places and find the third call I make. They had an art class that had started 5 minutes ago. So we get in the car, run over, and I start crying because I feel so like I'm on the right path, that we wound up in this art class that I didn't even know existed 10 minutes from my house. And she's got
Wow.
her easel and she's painting a bubblegum machine, and she's so happy. And the books on the walls are about Matisse and Jackson Pollock and Frida Kahlo. And I'm just swooning over the environment. And the only other adult in the room, she had her daughter there. She was the art teacher and her daughter was there. She said, yeah, we pulled my daughter out of school because it's time for her to learn what she really needs to learn, which is all of this. So I started an art school. And as I'm leaving, I turned to her and I said, when's your birthday? And she said, February 26th. I'm a Pisces. I said, that's my dad's birthday. I said, my dad died in July. And whenever I'm on the right path, he like shows up in the moment in some way. So I said, this is the path to follow.
Mm-hmm.
And it just felt so mystical and beautiful. But when I met you, I felt like my whole body just went into alignment. Like, this is it. This is how I want to live my life. This is what I want to be doing. And so it is unknown, but it's exciting. And I'm so grateful that you have gone before us in this journey. And so tell people where they can be a part of this and learn from you, listen to your podcast, and even get inside of your curriculum if they need curriculum for themselves.
Yeah. So my podcast is called The Feast Life, but my curriculum is called A Gentle Feast. So you can find that at agentlefeast.com. And it's a gentle feast on all the social media channels and whatnot. But I really like what you said about, and I see this a lot with homeschool moms, is they're still on the rat race. They're still striving. And it's like they don't realize that they're worthy just because they're human
Yeah.
to rest. And so it's, I can read a book when the dishes are finished, or when, if we checked off all the lessons for the day,
Right.
then I can go sit outside. And so I think for you, you have already worked through that. And so what a gift that you're going to be able to give your kids
Oh my
of,
God.
we can just be and enjoy and have this full feast and not struggle with the, is this enough? Am I achieving enough? Am I
Right.
worthy of this? Like, just be able to rest in the beauty of learning because you are already secure in what you're doing. And so I think it's just going to be so amazing for you and your kids.
Oh my God. It's so powerful. Really, this was so much fun.
It was
You
so
are a
much.
blessing and
Thank
you
you so
gave us a
much.
feast.
So
So
honored.
thank
I
you.
really do. Um, yeah, I really do enjoy this conversation so much and hope it was helpful.
Oh my God. Totally.